Welcome back to the timeline. We're going to talk about the DaVinci Resolve trim tool. Trim tool is something you'll find in any nonlinear editing system, and it's very handy. So a quick review. When we're using the select tool, which by the way, it's actually called the selection tool. I was calling it the select tool. Same thing, you get it. But when we're using the selection tool, as I showed you before, if we click on something and drag it around, it kind of overwrites things. See, that clip's gone now. It has its purposes, but often it's not what we want to use. So let me Command Z all that. Selection is great if I just wanted to reorder this. Like, let's do that over here. And notice it didn't delete this because I kept my mouse clicked down and didn't let go until it was over here. And then it kept it. If I would have let it go right there, it would have overwritten it. And I can move this over. And there you go, right? So the selection is nice for things like that. But what if I wanted to just make this shorter? Well, I could use the blade tool and put a cut and go back to selection mode, highlight this and delete it. That's one way to do it. What if I just want to do it by a couple frames? And when I say frames, remember we're typically shooting at 24 frames, and so you can edit frame by frame. If I zoom way in and use my arrows, these are going by frame. So 24 of those would be 1 second, right? So say I just wanted to take off a couple frames. Well, again, I could use the blade tool. I could just go here and go 1, 2, blade and cut it. That's fine. But there's a more sophisticated way to do this that allows you to tweak things in a better way. And it's called the trim tool. And you can access it right here. And if I click that, it puts me in trim mode. Now first, let me go back to selection mode and show you. If I try to trim the edge of this in selection mode, if I go down here and I wait for my pointer, there it turns to that icon, and I drag this, see, I just took 2 frames off, 1, 2, but it left a gap there. So I'm going to go to trim mode and do the same thing. Look, this moves with it, and it's called rippling it. Everything in the timeline, for example, let me look at this whole timeline. If there was a ton of stuff, this was a big movie, and there was 30 minutes of footage beyond this cut, when I trim this, all the rest of the timeline will ripple with that trim. So you can see that's very handy. And then if you notice in the top right, in my timeline viewer, when I'm actually performing a trim edit, it shows me where things are going to end up. This is a bad example because the gold bars don't really move, so it's not changing. So I'm just going to add another clip here that makes no sense, just so we can demo this. So we've got these 2 clips together. So now if I trim this, you can see it's showing me where the clip I'm trimming will end up. Now another way to do this, let's say I clicked right here on both clips and trimmed. Then it shows me where both are going to end up because I'm potentially changing both of them. So that's a basic trim edit, and you can see how it ripples the information with the edit. Now there's other things you can do in trim mode. For example, let me go back to selection mode. Let's say I liked this take, but I didn't like my in and out points. So I could either position my playhead, hit F, clear those old in and out points with Alt X, and then specify new ones, or I can do a trim edit, which is much easier. I'm going to go back to trim mode, and if I hover over the clip, in fact, let me raise the height of this clip a little bit. That'll make this easier. Okay, so if I hover over the top part of the clip while in trim mode, this is called a slip edit. If I click the mouse and drag, it slips the clip in this same length of time on the timeline. So I can change my in and out points and keep the length of the clip the same. So remember, this was a ripple edit. It moves the entire timeline and changes the length of the clip. A slip edit, so you just hover over and it changes, keeps the length of the clip the same, but moves your in and out points. Now if I go a little lower to that icon, this is called a sliding trim. Again, it keeps the length of the clip the same, but lets you move it on the timeline without changing the overall length of the timeline. And also, period and comma on the keyboard allow you to do it frame by frame. See if I go back to slip, and then use period and comma, frame by frame. And you can see that all up here. So trimming is really cool. I use it all the time when I'm cutting my films. If you have any questions about this, please post in the community, but you're at the point where you're ready to cut this little scene together. I have a link in this lesson that shows a cut that I did of it, but don't watch that yet. You need to think this through yourself to help your mind start evolving as a storyteller. It's only thinking through shots, placing them on the timeline, and working that around that will teach you how to do this. And then it's going to prepare you for pre-production part 2, where you're coming up with the shot list for your movie. Because you're going to look at this, and you're going to look at the shots that I got and think, man, if it were me, I would have done it this way. I would have changed the angle, or I would have shot this insert, or I've done this POV shot differently, etc. I did not do all this right. And you could do it better, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to think that way. What would you have done better than I did? And then once you've pieced yours together, then watch mine, because it's not just about the shots, but it's also about how you order that and how you cut things, how you piece it together. And so you can watch mine and then think, okay, I did this better than he did, or maybe I did something that gives you some ideas. And you'll notice too that in mine I added some other sound effects and stuff like that. We're not getting into that now. I don't want to distract you. I want you to be focused on storytelling and choosing your shots. But we'll get into all of that fun stuff in the post-production course. Have fun with this. A little side note that I didn't tell you, if I go back to selection mode, if I go to the very beginning and hit the space bar, if I want to see it larger than this, I can hit P on the keyboard, and there, I can see a larger view, which is nice. And I find this very useful to help jog my brain. Because if I'm looking at a cut here all the time, and I jump to full screen and watch it again, it hits me a little differently. But anyway, full screen playback. Have fun with this. I will see you soon in the closing lesson for post-production part 1, and then we'll jump into pre-production part 2.